Hello, I'm Janet Silver. On Canada Day, Ontario became the third province to offer relief at the gas pump, a move that follows Alberta, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Is a tax break at the pump good politics? Joining me are two experienced political operatives and my colleagues at Syntax, Jon Dugal and Jake Enwright. And Jake, I'm going to start with you because at a press conference last month, Ontario Premier Doug Ford took a shot at the federal government. He was saying, look, it's a no-brainer for the federal government to give taxpayers a relief at the pumps. Is he right?
He is. And to the point you made when you introed, it is good politics. All politics is local. It is the money we have in our bank accounts, the food we are trying to put on the table, and the mortgages we're trying to pay for. So those pocketbook issues hit home locally in everyday life. And that's why you're seeing the interest from different political actors that you are. Ford is smart to pass the buck up to the federal government as well, because despite the fact that the province has a lot it can do to provide relief at the pumps, as evidenced by the July 1st tax cut, everyone blames the federal government first, not their local governments. And that may be wrong, but it's the right politics for Mr. Ford.
So, Jon, why aren't the feds doing this?
I think it's really simple. On the one hand, what Jake said about it being great politics for Premier Ford, I think it goes across the board that is great politics for every single premier to kick this issue up to the federal government. Right now, people are coming out of COVID. They're still having some issues with their lives. So naturally, there is a little proclivity against governments of any kind, of any stripe across Canada. So the more the premiers are able to kick this back up to the federal government, the better it is for their own self-interest. But I think that there's a real reason here as to why the federal government at least, is not taking any real action. And that's just a philosophical difference between conservatives and liberals more broadly. I mean, conservatives have been calling for this tax cut for quite a while, at least at the federal level. We see it regularly through question period to last daily as to why the federal government hasn't offered a tax cut yet on the price of gas. But this is a liberal government that since 2015 has shown that they would prefer to have a means-tested monthly or annual stipend that would go directly to individuals to actually have the best outcome and the best impact for individuals at the source, specifically for those who need the help the most. And to be quite frank, I think one of the rationales, at least, that's going to be going through liberal heads right now is if gas is ranging anywhere from $2 to $2.10, $2.20, is a 5-cent shaving here, a 10-cent shaving there? Is it really going to make it more accessible for that family that's living on an income of $50,000, $60,000 a year who can't afford gas when it's $1.50 or even $1.20 as it was before the price hike really started to go strong?
Obviously, anything Justin Trudeau can do runs a bit counter to his brand and his perspective on climate change, right? And that's kind of the conundrum he's got himself into. But having been in the war room in 2021, when I watched Justin Trudeau throw his brand out the window and become this fire-breathing dragon on the campaign trail, like, I don't understand why him and his people aren't looking around the table going, hey, you know what? Maybe we can compromise a little bit on the brand here to give us some relief, maybe even just with caucus, who must be getting nervous. And they'll even be more nervous once they get back to Ottawa in September. I don't understand why they won't just do that as a token policy offering, even though, to your point a little bit, it's not going to do much because the real issue driving this all is supply and the fact that we haven't built up our infrastructure for the last 7 years.
I'm going to counter that real quick. And it'll be the one piece of advice that I would be giving any liberal premier or a liberal finance minister or a liberal prime minister right now is that you only have this option once. Right. So if you come into the gates a little too early and those gas prices continue to rise, consumers are going to be looking at you again for another relief at the pump. But at that point, you have no bullets left in the chamber. So if you wait it out, maybe things will stabilize, and hopefully they will here in the next couple of weeks. I'm living in PEI right now. We just saw an overnight adjustment of negative 10 cents. So that's going to take our price per liter down from about $2.10 to about $2 at the pump. So that's good for us. But if the federal government were to come in now and then it continues to skyrocket to $2.50, consumers then are going to be pounding the pavement again saying, where's my relief? Where's my relief? Where's my relief?
I'm laughing at you because it's policy by issues management, which is exactly the place we got ourselves into in the Harper government. And it was kind of this sign to all of us internally that maybe we were done for when our policy was being dictated by, concern that how the issue was going to be cleaned up in the mind of voters.
Yeah.
Jake, I want to pick up on something that John said earlier with regards to the Conservatives have been harping about gas prices up until the House rose in June. For the Conservatives, is that good politics, or are they latching on to something that they know will put the government in a rock and a hard place? In other words, why is that such an issue for the Conservatives?
It's an issue because at the end of the day, it's, as I mentioned at the top, it's good politics. It's a pocketbook issue that's local in nature. That's always a smart thing to attack and critique the government on. The problem that Conservatives have, and it's an issue we've had since Justin Trudeau was elected Prime Minister, we don't understand collectively that not everyone hates Justin Trudeau as much as we do. And I mean, we, the royal we, Conservatives. And so what Conservatives tend to get themselves into, and I've made this mistake in the past, and it's informed kind of how I believe the Prime Minister should be critiqued and attacked. Conservatives like to attack him on his motive and say that, he wants this. This was his goal all along. This is the real purpose behind his climate agenda. No one believes it. No one believes that for a second, because no one hates Justin Trudeau as much as, the backbenchers from Lethbridge, Alberta. So instead, the wiser thing to do is to attack him on responsibility. Assign responsibility to the Prime Minister, not motive, and you'll find more people agreeing with your point, because it doesn't really matter how we got here. Was it pipelines, Russia, Joe Biden? Who cares? The responsibility is the guy at the top to fix the problem.
But realistically, though, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, if we're saying maybe, in some circles believe that we have to give some sort of relief at the pump. At the end of the day, though, taxpayers are going to pay for that one way or the other, right?
Mm-hmm. And fortunately for the premiers, and this goes back to one of the first points I made, they can continue kicking this can uphill at the federal government. And to be quite frank, another reason why the federal government might not be very prone to activity here is that, again, we're coming out of COVID, right? We're coming down out of 2 years of lowered economic activity, even though we did weather the storm very strongly, especially in comparison to our G7 and G20 counterparts. And we've actually had a really strong recovery, which has in part fueled the crisis of fuel costs right now, right? Like the economy's been running so hot with so much pent up demand, with a lack of supply coming out of the end of COVID, that as we're coming into this recovery phase, people are looking to travel, people are getting out and about more. There was a sudden rush of demand, and supply couldn't keep up. So of course that's going to elevate costs. There's other factors at play there too. But during those 2 years of COVID, the federal government was also responsible for spending, give or take, 80 cents of every dollar for COVID measures throughout the country. Whether that was stocking up on PPE, whether that was stocking up on rapid antigen tests, PCR tests, vaccines, whether it was bailing out businesses is maybe a bit strong of a word, but supporting workers, supporting businesses with rent relief programs, with employee retention programs to make sure that employees were actually kept on the payroll throughout COVID so that they had access to benefits, giving direct assistance to Canadians, giving direct assistance to the provinces so that they could open up in a safe manner, so that they could install new ventilation systems in schools to make that more accessible for our youth. The federal government put up a lot of money over the last couple of years. The provinces, in the meantime, have been running surplus after surplus because of this sudden influx of federal cash into their coffers. So at least, from where I'm sitting, where PEI has gone surplus. Alberta recently posted a $3 or $4 billion surplus. So when you look at it from that sense, the federal government might not have as much capacity here to really take action comparatively to the provinces, who can much easier weather the storm of taking off the provincial gas tax.
But Johnny, the problem is, what we did before the pandemic, right? I used to work with this old guy named Bob down in Trenton when I was working for Rick Norlock, and Bob used to say, he's spending money like it's going out of style. And the problem is that was the situation we were in before we hit COVID. So Janet's right. Like, the taxpayer is going to pay in the end anyways, one way or the other. And I know one thing I've heard that people are concerned about with the Ford tax cut is that's supposed to be a tax that helps going to maintain the roads. I was just down in Southern Ontario. I got off the 407, got off the 401 outside of Mississauga. It like my son was like in awe at the traffic and the construction going on around them. And I swear, as somebody from there, it seems like every time I'm down there, they're always doing construction on the 401 west of Toronto and never gets any better. So we're going to pay for it one way or the other. Wouldn't it have been a little nice if we weren't so deep in the hole to begin with, or that we had some more to show for the hole we dug to begin with? And there's a lot of great initiatives the Trudeau government has actually launched, but I think no one believes that everything they've spent money on has been the wisest approach or had a meaningful impact in the day-to-day lives of people.
Wait a second. I just want to, maybe we should go back and rewind that tape when Jake, I think you were praising the Trudeau government there just momentarily. But one more thing though, before we go, we're talking about, maybe there is an optimum time if the feds are going to step in to provide any relief at the pump. And who knows if they're going to do that. Do we think, A, that they will eventually be forced to do that? And if so, what would that take? And I don't know who wants to jump in first.
Maybe I'll jump in first. I mean, this move by Biden is going to be definitely a push into that direction, right? Because Trudeau and Biden have been for a fair while now fairly aligned, right?
You're talking about US President Joe Biden.
Yes. And if Biden has taken this step and leaving Justin Trudeau as the only leader in the G7 to have not offered any type of relief at the pump, that might be a harbinger for the end of days in terms of non-activity. Now, what I would suggest is that I think this summer, what we might see here is an initial move towards a gas relief program where they might actually offer direct relief, whether it's a $500 check, a $1,000 check to consumers, based on, again, that sliding scale of means adjusted support directly to Canadians. I think we could see that maybe later this fall come into play, because the government was right in the first sense anyway to actually address the supply side issue. They approved Bay du Nord, I believe it's called, off the coast of Newfoundland, which is going to increase gas supply over the next couple of years. But they've also increased the cap that the oil sands are able to produce right now. So they're taking a stab at the actual supply side of the market disruption right now, and hopefully that will see some leveling off later this year when, according to Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, we're going to be pumping out 300 to 400,000 more barrels of oil a day. So hopefully that will give some relief in and of itself. But if we do get to that point, if prices continue to rise this summer rather than fall, as we might see them in traditional summers, I think we're going to get to an inflection point this fall where, in and around maybe that Labor Day weekend, when people start paying attention again, when kids are going back to school, when mom and dad start watching the news again a bit more actively, I think we might come to an inflection point there where it's time to readjust and say, okay, we've held off this long. We still have this one bullet left in our chamber. Now is the time to use it.
I think John's right. I think what Joe does is going to have a huge impact here, not necessarily because of the closeness between the Liberals and the Democrats, but because Canadians are so in tune with American culture and politics and news. And once the news reaches Canadians that Joe has done something, whether it's a gas tax holiday or whatever, there's going to be more demand. And, John, can you imagine, like, how much will Justin Trudeau loathe going into that first caucus meeting in September when they're back? Because all he's going to hear is just grumpy MPs who have just had their summers ruined by constituents inundating them with gas prices. And we all know, right? It's tough because, a lot of different people have a lot of different explanations for why gas prices are so high. And, there's only so many tools in the toolkit for the federal government, and they're desperately trying to explain that. It just doesn't fly with people, right? I've been there. I've tried it before. It doesn't work. If I'm Justin Trudeau, it's like, find me an international trip so I don't have to be there the first week the MPs are back, because they are going to be really, really grumpy.
It would be a much, much more fun time to be in opposition in that sense.
Yeah, well, it depends what September holds, I suppose, in terms of the opposition's leadership.
That's right. We have that on September 10th, when we'll find out who the new leader is for the Conservative Party of Canada. That's all the time we have today. Thank you to my colleagues, Jon Dugal and Jake Enwright. I'm Janet Silver. Till next time.